प्यार
रास्ते तेरे वास्ते मेरे सतगुरु प्यारे, कटलावांगे सारे दुख देख तेरे सहारे। सावन दातू लाल जी गिर पाल जी सारे जगदातू हाली, आए तेरे दरबार जी झोली भर देह खाली। चंदा बिरारा के बदला चलूक गया, बदला चलूक गया। मेरी आँखियाँ ना पानी भी सूख गया, पानी भी सूख गया। चंदा बिरारा के बदला चलूक गया, बदला चलूक गया। मेरी आँखियाँ ना पानी भी सूख गया, पानी भी सूख गया। मुक गई सारी रात वे होई बर्बाद है, तू अजवी नहाया की करा मेरे सोने या दिल भर भर आया। सावन दातू लाल जी गिर पाल जी सर।
Great Master used to say, his teaching, his method, the path of the masters, Sant Mat, is meant for the brave, not for the weak. You have to be a warrior. He used to use the word. You have to be a warrior to be in this path. Why did he say that? What is the need to be brave and warrior in order to meditate and find yourself? He explained that many of us cannot cope up with the pralabdha, the destiny we are born with. And we try to run away from it. We are cowards. If we cannot face what we designed as an experience of destiny, then that is not a spiritual path at all. That's escapism. The path of the Master says, you should be strong and be warriors and face your life where you have been placed in the middle. Cope up with all the ups and downs of destiny. And then in the middle of it, escape and go back to your home from this network into which you have come.
Hello, welcome everyone. Have a beautiful, nice week. I hope you're all well. Today we will start with a song by Anonymous, My Eyes Are Aching Without Your Darshan. Then we have introduction by Michael, and we will continue with a talk by Greg Leville. Topic is Hafiz and his divine wine of loving consciousness in God's heavenly tavern. After that, we will meditate for 5 minutes and we will watch Master's video on YouTube. And then we will meditate all together with love and devotion. Thank you. You can start.
राधा स्वामी टू ऑल बानी मीराबाई जी। दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, जब से तुम बिछड़े मेरे प्रभु जी, जब से तुम बिछड़े मेरे प्रभु जी, कब हो ना पायो, कब हो ना पायो चैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, शब्द सुनत मेरी छतिया कांपे, मीठे लागे बैन, एक टकटकी पंथ निहारूं, एक टकटकी पंथ निहारूं, भई क्षमा से, भई क्षमा से रैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, बिरहा बिथा कासो कहूँ सजनी, बह गई करवत ऐन, मीरा के प्रभु कब रे मिलोगे, मीरा के प्रभु कब रे मिलोगे, दुख मेटन, दुख मेटन सुख देन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन, दुखन लागे नैन दरस बिन। राधा स्वामी जी।
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Heavenly Courage, where we learn courage from warriors and the wisdom from the sages. If you want God's grace, ride with us in this heavenly courage. In this heavenly courage is an intensive course of Godhood, where we all sit in the vibration of God, in the vibration of the kingdom of God, in the vibrations of the saints. Our inner Godhood, our divinity comes forward and guides us in the satsang of the saints. Welcome, my dear brothers and sisters, for another cup of wine, for another drink of God, for another godly day in intoxication, where in this classroom of love no one fails. By grace alone we all shall pass. For our sake, for our sake, for our own sake, God and Master has entered our tale. They have entered our tale. We keep hold of the hand of God and Master. We walk with Him and say farewell. We say farewell to the old ways and means. Then He shall remove the veil. He shall remove the veil, and we shall live forever in His holy lap to enjoy His nectar, His God, His the kingdom of God. Here in this satsang of love, we learn the language of love, the language that is beyond the language, beyond all languages. There is the verbal language that we learn in school, and we can communicate with. There is the non-verbal language, the language of the body, where we can learn from the movements of the human how, in what condition he's at, if he's defensive, or if he's threatening, or if he's depressed, or if he's courageous. That's called the non-verbal language, the non-verbal communication. But there is a language higher than that, and that is the language of love, the language of the heart, the language of the heart, where satsang is the language of the heart. For we speak here in satsang from the tongue of the heart. From the tongue of the heart, the words of love pours. From the tongue of the heart, it comes forth and it teaches us, it leads us towards divinity, towards God, and towards the kingdom of God. This language of love is conveyed is conveyed by the soul, from soul to soul and from over soul to soul. This language of love is understood by the soul, as there are the words that are comes out. It's like maybe few percentage, like 30% or 40%. But the language of the soul, when soul talks to soul, and when over soul, the soul of all souls talks to soul, then that is the language of the heart, and that is 70%. So it comes directly. It comes directly. The language of the heart comes directly from soul to soul and from over soul, the soul of souls, to our soul, and it penetrates. It has no barriers. The language of the heart has no barriers, and it infuses the love in everybody. And this language of the heart is contagious. We all sit here in this contagious atmosphere of God, and we all get the virus of love. We all fall in love deeper and deeper in this courage of love, in this heavenly courage of love, the heavenly courage of the brave ones, the warriors of God, where we learn the courage. In this heavenly courage of God, we get infused with the love of God, and we go one step further towards our true home. Here, since Master, since Baba Sawan Singh, and since Ishwar Ji has blessed our congregation of love and has blessed this heavenly courage, since then he has been sending his dearest and closest souls, the closest souls to his heart, he has been sending. And what a great honor to sit in the presence of these souls, Some of these souls are much advanced. They have they have walked the path of love. They have walked the path of love, and to sit in their midst, to sit in their aura, is their aura and in their godly vibration. As every human being has a vibration, this vibration that every human being has, the more the person has polished the mirror of the soul, the more he can reflect the divinity. Just like a pure, clean mirror can reflect the sun, the full sun directly, the same thing. Someone, people who have cleaned, holy souls, pure souls who have cleaned the mirror of the soul can reflect divinity. And what happens when they reflect their divinity on us? Then our soul comes up. Our divinity is pulled toward their divinity, and those two divinities mingle. And when the two divinities mingle, then all attributes, all godly virtues are poured from one soul to other, from one oversoul to the other, from one divinity to the other, and it all becomes a big holy dance. It all becomes an enriched, powerful love atmosphere. This is what happens when we sit in daily satsang every day. This is what happens when we are sitting in the atmosphere of someone who has bowed down to the fullest. As in this holy congregation, we all learn how to bow down, how to put our head down to the perfect masters. And when we put our head down to the feet of the perfect master, this is not a weakness, but it's the power of all powers. As when we put our cup below the tumbler, then we get to fill our cup. And in this satsang, we bow our head down to all the holy ones. And when I look at you, my holy family, you are all holy. You all have the perfect master living in you. You all have Ishwarji and other perfect master. And I bow down to all of you. I put my head on all your feet as I see you radiant with master. I see you all courageous. I see you all holy souls, my holy family of my brothers and sisters. What a great honor to sit with you. What a great honor to sit with you and to learn from you and get infused by your vibration, by your radiance, and by God living in you. This is how beautiful this satsang, this classroom of love is. This classroom of love, everybody gets something. No one leaves this classroom of love with empty hands. Everybody who comes here fills his cup with divine nectar, as we are all here after one thing that is truth. And we all have the urge to merge. We don't care about, we have said goodbye to the old ways and means of this world. We care not about the pride. Care not about fame or name or anything else. All what we care about that we develop more spiritually. All we care about is that we get inspired by those who have walked the path in front of us, our elders in God who have stayed in the heavenly carriage and can give us so much knowledge, so much wisdom, and can infuse God and vibrate us with their energy of love. This is how great blessing we have been given by Ishwar Puri Ji and by Baba Sawan Singh, as we learn the language of love. We learn the language of love every day. And every day we get infused by more and more and more love. Deeper and deeper we get pulled. We get pulled by divinity deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And we stay there and we stay there and we stay there. And we drink more and we drink more. As the real drunkards of God, the real lovers of God cannot stop kissing God. They cannot stop kissing God. And when the real drunkards of God, when one tavern closes, they go and look for another tavern where more wine is being served, where more wine is being served, because they cannot stop drinking the divine nectar. This is why I'm announcing to you that when this tavern closes, when this tavern closes, another tavern will open on Wednesdays and on Wednesdays, on Sundays, and on Fridays. The the tavern, another tavern opens where more wine will be served by our dear brother and dear friend Greg Lavelle. So for the true drunkards, those who cannot stop kissing God and they want to keep kissing God one moment after the other moment after the other moment, because they cannot leave hold of the divinity. They cannot leave hold of the divinity. As if they leave hold of the divinity, then it becomes like a fish out of water, a fish in agony. This is how the true lovers of God feel when they leave the hand of the master. So for the true drunkards, those who want to keep drinking and drinking and drinking more, and who want to keep filling their cup, then another tavern opens, the tavern of our dear brother Greg, on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. There will be more wine to be served. I will announce. I will put it on all our sites. It will be a different Zoom link, so all of you can have the link and the times. I figured out the times also, and we can enjoy, after this satsang finishes, we can enjoy another satsang, and then all meditate together and enjoy God and the kingdom of God. So that's sorry it was long, but this is what I wanted to say today, and I thank Master for the seva, and I welcome our dear brother Greg.
Thank you, Michael. It's a great honor to be here with so many devoted lovers of the Lord. Every single one of you is my guru. In every single one of you, I feel your devotion. And it's that devotion that fuels my devotion. I was excited when I discovered that Michael Bahu also had a love of Hafiz. Hafiz is not just a poet. He perhaps is the greatest poet that has ever lived. And so many poets, so many great poets have said the same thing. But he's not only a poet, he's a godly, spiritual poet. And his poets are beautiful. He's a little bit difficult to understand at first because he uses so many metaphors, metaphors on top of metaphors on top of metaphors at times, and all talking about specific spiritual experiences. I will do my very best today to go through 4 very important poems. All his poems are important. But these are beautiful poems about the spiritual path that we're all on. He talks a lot about being in the tavern. In other words, being in meditation at the eye center or beyond. He talks a great deal about the beloved wine. This is the true name of God. It's the formless, tasteless name of God. He talks about the wine filling the cup. The cup is the soul. And sometimes he talks about the flagons of wine when he's totally intoxicated with God's love. So I'll go through these poems and I'll do my best to elucidate the metaphors and the hidden meanings in these poems. In the first poem, Hafiz says, again, the power over myself, that wine did waylay. Again, that wine showed its power over me without delay. Again, the wine he's talking about is the flow of God consciousness directly from God into his soul, into his consciousness in his soul. He says, 1,000 blessings be heaped upon that red wine. which has now driven my face's yellowness far away. I praise the hand that was first to gather the grape. May the foot that first pressed down on it never decay. And here he talks about the eternal love of God that birthed us at the very genesis of the soul and gave us our sip of wine, our first sip of wine 3, 4, 5 billion years ago. Fate decreed love for me, he says, and wrote it on my forehead. Whatever fate has written is impossible to wipe away. The fate that the soul has from this first cup of wine that Hafiz talks about is a love of God that will return us back to God himself. But he reminds us, do not boast of wisdom. Aristotle must give up life like the miserable old beggar when death has its day. Go far away, you pious fanatic. Don't criticize us, for the work of God is no small thing in any way. Every second, every microsecond of our life is an example of God's work, God's grace, God's miracle of life, God's miracle of awareness, God's miracle of soul consciousness that he bequeaths upon us as we live. This is no small thing in any way. Don't pass your whole life in such a way in this world, Hafiz continues, that when you are dead, he is dead, your coffin will simply say. Instead, he reminds us to strive for life and eternal loving consciousness. He says, be happy. Always, always, always be happy with God's grace, God's love, God's miracle of awareness that we always have. Be happy and don't worry and don't be showing grief. Be content. Such striped satin cloth of contentment is like silk today. From the cup of eternity, intoxicated with God's unity, become all who, like Hafiz, drank the pure wine away. In essence, he's saying, drink, drink, drink this eternal wine. Don't stop drinking till the very end of time. It's a beautiful little poem. As the next poem, Hafiz goes a little bit deeper into the subject of the wine and the mystery cavern. Really, he says, the jewel of the treasure of mystery is today as it always was. Within that seal and mark, love's treasury is today as it always was. Lovers are trustworthy ones who keep love's secret. Undoubtedly, their eyes, raining jewelry, is as it was. Ask the breeze how all night and each breath of dawn. Our soul's friend, your hair's perfumery is as it was. There's not a seeker of the ruby and jewel, but even so, the sun is hard at work in mine and the quarry as it always has been. The color of the blood of our heart, which you conceal, is visibly in your lips, ruby depository, as it always has been. Come and visit the victim destroyed by your glance, expecting you, the helpless one's memory is as it was. I said, your Hindu black hair won't attack again. And years and years and years have passed, and still its robbery is as it always has been. Hafiz, tell again the tale of your eyes, tears of blood. It in this fountain is still flowing, watery as it is. Now let me go a little bit deeper into this beautiful poem. The jewel of the treasury of mystery. The jewel is the love of the one for the many, and for the many as the one. It is the singular jewel of the oneness, of the omnipresence, of the omnipotence of God in an omni-consciousness. Really, he says, the jewel of the treasure of mystery, the greatest mystery of the soul, the greatest mystery of God, is today as it always was. And within that seal and mark, love's treasury is also today as it always has been. The treasury of love is the loving consciousness of God. And we were created from that very loving consciousness. Yea, in fact, Hafiz proclaims again and again and again, like so many saints, that our very soul is God consciousness. And thus it is, you see, as it always was. Ask the east breeze, he says, how all night until the breath of dawn, our soul's friend, your hair's perfumery is as it always is. Here he's talking about the divine current, the name of God that flows throughout the entire cosmos, that flows through our soul. And he's talking about our awareness in the garden, you see, where we feel the sun-heart at work. He's talking about the crown chakra, the experience in the crown chakra. And this is where and when you feel the eastern breeze, God's divine loving consciousness coming out of the Sahaj portal, embracing all the souls that are reaching up into the heavens, all the roses that are in bloom, waiting for the morning breeze, waiting for God's love, God's darshan in the Sahaj portal to mesmerize them and merge them forever within his consciousness. He says, your hair's perfumery. When Hafiz talks about the hair of the divine, he's talking about the audible life current that flows so beautifully, so sweetly, so divinely from the heavens into the loving souls at the crown chakra. Your hair's perfumery is as it always has been. Our soul has always been in love with God, you see, because the very essence of our soul is God's consciousness as well. How could it be otherwise? It is, he says, as it always has been. There is not a seeker today of the ruby and the jewel, a true seeker, he means. But even so, the light of God, the sun, you see, is hard at work in my soul, and the mind that I work within, the life that I work within. And it is now as it always has been. So he's saying that God's consciousness has been flowing into him since time immemorial. And now he feels it. Now he knows it. Now you see his consciousness has almost come full circle from God's consciousness into the soul, then into the mind, then back into the soul, and now about to merge back into God's own very consciousness. He explains it even more beautifully in the next sentence. He says, the color of the blood of our hearts, which you conceal, is visible in your lips' ruby depository, as it always has been. The Sahaj portal is shaped like an eye or like a pair of lips. Ishwar talked about that in one of his satsangs. Such a beautiful thing to see. A true lover of the Lord has forgotten that he exists by the time he gets to the crown chakra, which is why he says the color of the blood of our hearts is hidden from us by the time we reach the garden of heaven, the crown chakra, the first stage in the causal plane. He says it's hidden by God. It's hidden by God because our attention is totally on God. We've forgotten, you see. We've looked and felt his love for such a long, long time. We've come to the realization that in our own way, we've been in love with God for billions of years. Billions of years. Always seeking that ultimate happiness, that ultimate peace, that ultimate love, that ultimate lover, which we end up discovering inside of us as our true self. Which is why he calls the color of God's love as the blood, very blood within the heart of our soul, concealed by God until he brings us into his consciousness. He says it's finally visible in your lips' ruby depository, as it is. The light at the crown chakra has been described as brilliant as a million suns. It's an incredible light. It's a blinding light. But if your soul is true and your love is true, you'll ignore everything except the love that you feel at the heart of your soul when you're in the crown chakra. And in this true love for God, the Sahaj portal will open up within the very center of your holographic consciousness. And you'll see a light, the light shining off the face of God, shining through his darshan, that is 1,000,000,000 times brighter than all the sunlight at the crown chakra. And how does he describe this? He says, come and visit the victim that has been destroyed by your glance. Hafiz is saying, I realize now I never was. I realize now there's only you, only you, only you. From the light of a single glance, you've dissolved the final veil within the soul, the veil of self-perception of the soul, and merged me into your love. with a single glance. He continues, destroyed by your glance, which expects only you, which experiences only you. The helpless one, the helpless soul's memory disappears as it always has. Hafiz is talking to himself. Tell again the tale of your eyes. Tears of blood over the billions of years. Tell again the tale of your tears. So that in this fountain that is still flowing, still watery, you can merge within God's own very consciousness. Such a poet, such a divine poet. So this next poem is beautiful too. Praise be to God. What wonderful wealth He has given to me tonight. Because my dear divine beloved came to me quite suddenly tonight. You see, it always happens suddenly. It always happens when we least expect it. The mind cannot sacrifice itself to God. The mind cannot experience true love. It's always looking at itself. It's always creating memories of itself, doing something, tasting, touching, feeling, seeing, hearing. Always pictures of itself doing something, including making the memories, recalling the memories, imagining future memories. But it cannot see God. It cannot sacrifice itself to God. Visions of God, communion with God, always comes when we least expect it. Expectation is a function of the mind. It's not a function of the soul. He says, the moment in my soul that I saw my beloved's beautiful face, I bowed, I succumbed, I melted in praise. Thanks be to the eternal grace of God that I am fortunately totally happy tonight. The seed of my infinite patience has now blossomed in this union. I'm harvesting the fruit of my patience, and fortune is with me tonight. It takes days, sometimes weeks of off and on concentration before we get close to the eye center. Even then, it happens through God's grace. In the next few days before we melt into the eye center, we can't remember any thought. We don't hear any thoughts. We don't hear any emotions. Perhaps on the day before, the day of, we'll experience some tiny thoughts like, oh, my Lord. Tiny, tiny thoughts. And then thoughts disappear altogether. We learn patience in the earliest stages. We learn to endure everything life throws at us. We learn to ignore it and instead wait for the feeling of the divine presence. Wait till we can feel his grace flowing through our lives, flowing through our consciousness, flowing through our soul. And when that happens, we just melt, we just melt, we just melt. And in the melting, we learn an even greater patience, an even greater union with the magnetism, with the pull of God's pull on the soul. It has to become everything for us on the path. When our love for God, you see, is as constant as his eternal love for us, then the union can occur. And over time, we lose patience with everything else except our attention on the divine presence within. This is what takes us from one level of consciousness to another. The unwillingness to blank, the desire to stay within his divine presence, no matter what we experience. The test in the cave of Brahm, before you reach the crown chakra, is so intense. It's an empty spot above the spine, below the crown, below the soft spot in the head. It's an empty spot, surrounded by tens of thousands of synapse endings, firing electrical bolts through you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times per second. If you've learned patience, if you've learned to want nothing but God's love, then you won't look, you won't wince as these magnetic bolts go screaming through your body. You won't look at the colors, you won't listen to the crackling sound, you won't listen to the thunder. You wait patiently for God's presence within your consciousness. And when your patience has been perfected, when you can sit within the cave of Brahm for weeks at end, and I do mean weeks at end, then in his grace, he will pull us through into the garden of life called the crown chakra. You see, so when Hafiz is talking about the grace of God just before the union with God, he has gone through all these stages, all these tests, all these years and years of unbelievable patience, of a love so intense that it never blinks. He says the seed of my infinite patience that he gets from God has now blossomed into this union with the divine. In God's grace, I'm harvesting the fruit of my patience. Fortune, the divine fortune, the divine gift that God gave to us so many years ago, so many billions of years ago, has now blossomed as the heart of this union with God. I'm harvesting the fruit of my patience. Fortune is with me tonight. My slumbering destiny has awakened, and I am fully approved. Until we really merge in God's consciousness, it's only a thought. It's only a hope. It's only an emotion. but in that single microsecond of an existence where we merge into that consciousness, this perception, self-perception of the soul disappears. Everything else is totally different from that point forward. And that's why he says, my slumbering destiny as the mind, and then as the soul, has awakened. The mind is dissolved, you see, the soul has dissolved. And his fortune, his destiny has finally been approved. His destiny of becoming one again with God consciousness has finally culminated in the union with God. He says, it is my life's luckiest night, for I hold the guarantee tonight of eternal union with God. I have resolved that even if my head is cut off, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In God consciousness, there is nothing else. There is just God's consciousness as everything else, including our history, including our dreams, including our illusions. Even if my head's cut off, it doesn't matter. Removing the world's veil, God's secret has been shown to me tonight. My blood will write, I am the truth. The blood, of course, the only blood that courses through the soul is the blood of God consciousness, which has always been telling us, I am the truth. But we don't really truly know that. We don't truly understand what it means till that moment of divine union occurs in God's grace. As he says again and again and again in this poem, I am the truth, Ana Haq, on the earth. If like Mansur they kill me on the gallows mercilessly tonight, my soul will say, Ana Haq, Ana Haq, Ana Haq. In God, I am the truth. Beloved, my dearly beloved, you possess this divine wealth. You are this divine wealth that I'm rumbling about within this poem, you see. I'm but the poorest of beggars at your door. I want nothing but the gift of your grace, the gift of your glory. That alone will make me blissfully happy tonight and every night hereafter. All the time I've been frightened that Hafiz will be lost and obliterated. But every moment that I am in possession of such ecstasy as this tonight, I no longer care. Such a beautiful, beautiful poem by Hafiz. This next poem is very deep in metaphors. He talks about, again, being the flower within the garden. Quite often he calls that flower, he refers to himself as the rose within the garden. The garden, of course, being the crown chakra. He talks about the lamp, the magic lamp, and that's the light coming out of the Sahaj portal on the other side of our consciousness, deep within the center of our consciousness, within the crown chakra. He talks about the seal ring of Jamshid. Jamshid is a fabled city in Persia, but it also refers to the elixir of immortality or heaven's wisdom. It's often referred to as the window of the soul to the seven heavens beyond it. It's often referred to as the vine of God or the garden of God by the sea of existence. Sea of existence, of course, that the poets talk about when they talk about Jamshid is the causal plane, the sea of existence on the other side of the crown chakra. Crown chakra sits at the nexus point between the causal plane and the astral plane. It was also mentioned by Omar Khayyam in one of his famous poems, the Rubaiyat. The word of God, the ancient ruby that reveals God. Let me read you the line from the Rubaiyat that Hafiz was referring to, even though it's not mentioned that directly in the poem. He says, Iram is gone with all its rose, and Jamshid's seven-ringed cup where no one knows. But still, God's vine, her ancient ruby yields, and still a garden by the water blows. The garden, of course, is a direct reference by Omar Khayyam to the crown chakra next to the water, the sea of existence in the causal plane. The vine, of course, yields the ancient ruby. And you see the Sahaj portal is lined with crimson red, the color of crimson red. All of Hafiz's poems talk about the red wine. All of the references to the Sahaj portal mention red in some way, shape, or another. The seven-ringed cup where no one knows. It's the soul in heaven. So now let me read the poem. If from your garden a flower I gather, what does it matter? If by your lamp my feet's way I ponder, what does it matter? O Lord, in the shelter of the cool shade of the cypress, burning, I sat for a moment to recover. What does it matter? The cypress is a direct reference, a metaphorical reference to the saint Zoroaster, who was called the Cypress of Persia. Most Persian poets, most Persian scholars will know this. So Hafiz often refers to God as the cypress. And in the shade of the cypress, he's saying, in the way of Zoroaster, in the way of the saints, in the way of God, in the way of God, in the shade of the cypress. It's the same meaning. I sat for a moment to recover in the garden. The pain of separation is sometimes so great. You see, when you first taste the true essence of God awareness, we usually can't handle it for more than a second. But it has mesmerized the soul just the same, paralyzes the soul. Mira, Hafiz, Dadu, Tulsi, Kabir talk about the endless night of the soul and the incredible pain of separation. This happens after the soul has tasted God's essence, but has not yet been able to merge into it. So here he says, "O Lord, if I'm in the shelter of the cool shade of the cypress, nothing else matter. I am in your garden, nothing else matter. I can see the light of your lamp coming from the Sahaj portal. Nothing else matters. Nothing matters. His grief doesn't matter. His journey doesn't matter. Nothing matters to a soul this close to union with God except God's grace, except God's mercy, except the loving hand of God as it pulls the soul into itself. This is the very end of the bhakti of the soul, you see, because the soul's self-perception dissolves in union with God. It dissolves because it is returning to its source. He goes on to say in this poem, the seal ring, the seventh ring of the seven rings you see of the heavens, the seal ring of Jamshid, that has always worked hard for the good fortune of the soul. If upon the ring's ruby, you, my God, are the reflection of my soul, what does it matter? He's saying to himself, you have always been my soul. You have always been my soul. You have always been the consciousness, my love, my loving consciousness in my mind and in my soul. But I didn't know it. And now, as you pull me in through your darshan, I see nothing but your reflection as my soul. What does it matter? He says, nothing matters. Nothing matters. Nothing matters except this union with God. He says, my reason, my mind, my thoughts, my efforts, all efforts have gone from this house. And if this is wine that I have now had, if it is his wine, and I'm in the house of faith, what does it matter in comparison with his loving consciousness? My very understanding of his presence is inconsequential to his consciousness. As I merge into it, I realize that nothing else is of any consequence. As I merge into his consciousness, he's saying nothing else has ever been of any consequence, of any matter. I have reached the destiny, and now nothing else matters except his consciousness. The journey doesn't matter. The desire, the vision, the 4 billion years of tears, even that doesn't matter. When the city's pious look for a king and judges favors, if of the fair one, if of God, and only God I choose to be a lover, what does it matter? If they cut off my head, if they cut off my limbs, but I can keep my love of God. What does it matter? I've spent my precious life on his wine and on the love of his love. What comes from this life, or from any life, or from any other soul, doesn't matter as much as his love for me. No, it doesn't matter, you see. He says, my Lord knew that I was a lover and kept silent. If Hafiz now also knows that as God, I am the lover, nothing else will ever matter ever again. It's a very beautiful poem. One more poem. Clearly, he says, the objective of my vision is centered upon your dark mole. The dark mole on the cheek of God is a metaphor for the connection point, for the nexus point, wherein the love of God flows into the loving consciousness of the soul. I will read this sentence again. Clearly, the objective of my vision of the soul is centered upon your dark mole, because the value of that incomparable, incomprehensible black pearl, only the jeweler knows. We cannot know the real value of God's consciousness, of God's loving consciousness for us, for our soul, until he truly merges us into him. This is what he is saying here. Because you see, then we become the jeweler and not just the customer of the jeweler. Don't give service as beggars do to gain a kind of material reward. Because the way to pay for the servant's service, only God knows. I'm drowned in the water flowing from my eyes. But what? What can I do? Not everyone who is in the ocean the way of a swimmer knows. I am but the slave of that daring adventurer, God. And whatever he wants to do, I do. Who by the means of turning into an alchemist, a pure beggar knows. It's God, you see, that turns the soul into an alchemist, so that the alchemist, the soul, can discover the essence of God's loving consciousness. He says, I staked my heart that was insane, but I did not really understand that this being, his existence, was birthed by Adam, but yet was truly an heir, truly known only by an angel. Each one who reigned by form and face all over the lovely ones would conquer the world if each the law of a justice giver knows. The poetry of Hafiz that fascinates the heart will be known by one who has his God's natural grace and the passwords of the doorways to heaven. Every one of us knows this password. The door to heaven is at the core of our heart, of the soul. And the key to open that door is the merger into loving consciousness of God. We begin to feel it when we're starting out on the path. We become drunk in that first bubble of consciousness at the eye center. We melt even further into the regions of joy and grace, immense grace. A grace infused as your consciousness, grace of God as your consciousness. And then eventually we reach the crown chakra. After having spent lifetimes, hundreds of lifetimes, thousands of lifetimes in different forms, hundreds of lifetimes perhaps as a human, we're blessed with a human body within which the soul is beginning to awaken as it is pulled by God's very consciousness into and unto itself. The journey within is inevitable. The awakening of the soul is inevitable. The attention of the soul on nothing but the flow of God's loving consciousness into the soul is inevitable. The return of the consciousness, the loving consciousness of the soul into its source as God's loving consciousness is also inevitable. And this is the greatest secret of God, the greatest secret of our soul, the greatest mystery of our life that Hafiz talked about in this very first poem tonight. God's consciousness is deep within us, and He Himself is the means to reach it. And we can only marvel at the miracle and pranam, 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 endlessly at His divine, loving presence, which is always, always, always at the core of our soul. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, dear Greg. That was amazing. We could almost taste the divine wine. So amazing. I didn't know if you knew, but last week, Mohanji, he's the one that did the seva of driving Sant Thakar Singh. He was in satsang, and he inspired all of us. We can learn from this great warrior the depth of devotion. Just like when he puts his hands like that and he goes like this, you could feel, you could learn that depth of devotion that Mohanji has touches the soul. So he will be speaking tomorrow. In
Beautiful,
satsang.
very
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah. I was wondering if you can tell us, Brother Greg, the benefits of a satsang like this for people who were totally absorbed to the mind, body, and soul. And then after that, you can have the honor to lead us into meditation. And when you say the word Namaste, I'll play Ishwar Puriji.
In every satsang, from every devoted seeker or guru or teacher, the soul awakens when it's reminded of its purpose, when it's reminded of the divine presence within itself. As a speaker, I can do nothing but hold the mirror. It's your love. It's your divine love, the love of your soul, that awakens your soul when anyone is speaking of God with love. Divine love is the thing that connects all souls to God consciousness. And the soul has been hungering for this divine love since the very genesis of its existence. It's distracted by the wanderings of the mind. But as old souls, you see, we're so tired of all the distractions of the mind. The soul eventually becomes hungry for something other than what it is as the mind. And when it feels the gentle pull, the gentle reminder of God's loving consciousness within it, it looks within, it jumps within, it cries tears, flooding of tears of remembrance of God's consciousness. And then the soul does what it was born to do automatically. It melts deeper and deeper and deeper into the magnetism of God's divine presence within the soul. And I, like you, am utterly helpless to do anything but melt within the pull of that divine love. Namaste. So let's close our eyes, feel the divine pull within the silence of our souls, within the mystical silence that's part of the aura of God's divine presence, the heart of our soul. Feel the divine presence. Surrender to the divine presence and melt, melt, melt within that love. Namaste.
That his power to think about this, to talk about it, has improved so much by pretending to be dead. So pretending to be dead led to his discovery, which is what we also do, because when we say, let us be unaware of the body, we're pretending to be dead. Dying while living means that you are pretending to be dead. But the process is excellent to discover who will you be, what will you be like, what form will you be if there is an afterlife. Of course, the proof of the pudding lies in the eating, and therefore you have to actually practice and not make it just a theoretical model just to discuss it. This can happen. If you do it actually and locate yourself there and make that a beautiful place and become unaware of the body, you will have all the experiences that people have described about heavens, all the experiences that have been described anywhere. You can even have an experience of meeting God, the creator of this entire experience. One step only. It's still a wonderful place you'll be in. You can explore, you can fly. You can fly in the universes that exist beyond this universe as well as this universe. How many of you would like to have this experience while I'm here? Well, we'll do it. At least you would like to fly, not with this body, but with your inner self, the inner body. I must tell you that what we have reached by all this description of how it can be done, this is all reaching a level of experience which is being created by a self, a form of a self, a cover upon the self which lies inside this body. The physical body does not enhance the use of our sense perceptions, it dulls them. It is only a little bit of things we can peep through the physical body. In these eyes, you can see much better with the inner eyes. With the eyes of your so-called imaginary self that we're talking about, you can see much better, you can hear much better. All perceptions through senses operate better. Of course, if you are a serious meditator and stay long enough every day to examine what kind of self that is having all these experiences, you will discover that the self that we are talking about, which flies, has no weight and is able to do those things and has greater capacity to perceive, that self is nothing more than sense perceptions itself. Sense perceptions constitute what we call the inner body, the afterlife, the body that we have in the afterlife. Sense perceptions do not die, even if this body dies. The power to perceive through senses, divided senses, seeing, touching, tasting, smelling separately, do not die when this body dies. And you can examine this by becoming unaware of the body and see how well they function. But that is step one. We are still in a world with space and time. We are still in a world where there is a past and present. There's no change in that. It's a new way in which we find there is something in us that outlasts this body. Something in us that was there before this body was born. And that seems to be transferring from one form to another in physical form, like this body, or in some other forms. That the truth is that that thing is much longer lasting than this physical body. That experience comes to us without much hassle if we follow this practice. Of course, there are techniques to help us to do this, and we go back to the same things we are doing, like repetition of a mantra. Why do we repeat mantras? Do we repeat them because of the power of those words? Do we repeat them because we absorb ourselves by repetition and don't think of other things? What is the use of these? We examine the practical side of it, that they are helpful in the beginning, as in the starting point when we're trying to become unaware of the body. They are useful because by repeating the mantra, by repeating words, we prevent the mind from thinking of outside things. It's just like squeezing the words of thought. With artificial words, you pump in the thought stream and try to hold it there. There's a benefit of that. It's a simple benefit, but it does work. But the problem arises when we keep on repeating the words and the mind still thinks of other things. Have you ever noticed that when you repeat any words, especially words given which are generally very unattractive and boring words, we don't like to repeat. If I were told to repeat the word God, at the same time I'd like to repeat the word pizza, I'd prefer pizza, I know what it tastes like. God I haven't seen, I have no idea. I'm just repeating a word. It's just a simple word. Therefore, these unattractive words that we repeat, and we can't repeat good words because all the good words are connected with our experiences outside. It won't serve any purpose to repeat words which are bringing our attention outside. So we have to use words that don't bring our attention. So mantras are always created with such strange words, so they should have no relationship with our experiences outside. It's a clever device so that we don't think of outside things, but keep on repeating words. I'm sure most of you have tried this experiment of repeating words as a mantra, as a simran, and then found out that the mind is still thinking, even commenting upon those words. Am I doing it too fast? Am I doing it slow? Where are these words coming from? From the same mind. And the same mind can keep on repeating words and still think of other things. Because this mind does not function in one level. It has many channels. It's like it can jump from one channel to another. So you can be using these words which are useful. Useful to squeeze the words of thought out of your head. But the mind can jump and start thinking in another channel, another voice, softer voice, a softer sound. Watch carefully. There is a voice that you use, which you think is your voice to repeat. Have you ever thought, when you close your eyes and say, I'm thinking in words of something, which voice are you using? It's a voice that you associate with your voice. And then there's a finer voice that's commenting upon it. And if you are careful, you can see even a commentator upon the commentator. Looks like there are several channels through which the mind thinks, and it can destroy your power to concentrate your attention by using another channel and think in that and take you out, which happens all the time in a meditation. I had the good opportunity when I was working with the government in India to host the arrival and housing of His Holiness Dalai Lama. He at that time was a young man when he came, and he had two tutors who were teaching him how to meditate. And I was at Dharamsala, posted as a deputy commissioner there. So it was my duty. I received him, I put him in a house there. Then we began to go out on trips together, which he used to love. He was learning some English at that time and some Hindi. And during our discussions, he pointed out that the biggest difficulty he had found was that the mind can think in several levels, and he had been able to one day observe how the mind, if you observe how many levels it is thinking of, he could be able to observe up to 8 levels. Most people can't do more than 4 or 5, even if you try. You try to figure out how many levels the mind is working. First, the mind works by thinking in your language, in your voice. Then there's a top voice on that, commenting upon it. Then what happens? Some other person's picture comes in front of you. Your friend, your wife, your child, somebody there talking to you. That's also you talking in somebody else's voice. The mind has so many ways to keep on distracting you from the first principal voice that you're using in meditation. So this is another problem that people have shared with me. People with meditation for years and years have shared this problem, that the mind is so powerful that it takes us away no matter, even if we keep on repeating words. Naturally, because you can repeat words with your one voice and the mind will take you away with another voice. The answer to this question, how to handle this, is to use repetition of words with every voice that you can hear. Most people don't do that, but it's a good way to control it. I have practiced it. It was useful. I suggest you try it. Every voice that comes in your head, do not stop repeating the words. Add that voice at the same point where you are, and then you will hear two voices repeating it. A third comes, add the third one. A person's picture comes up, an image comes up of somebody else there, join them. Supposing 10 people appear in front of you while you are meditating, let all 10 join you. You know what is the best way to repeat words in order to control the mind from running out is to make everything that comes repeat the words. Good simran, good repetition of a mantra exists when every character in your head is repeating it. It's a chorus. And loud. You can't imagine how much loud voice you can hear without opening your mouth. And it's all inside. It's effective. So there are many techniques, short techniques that I will share with you in the next couple of days that I'm here, in which you can make it very practical and achieve the result that you want to have. So the words that we repeat, they help us to concentrate attention. If we can use all the language, all the channels of the mind, all pictures it can make, participate in the repetition, then at least something is gone, but then you will have a problem of images coming, memories coming. With no words, you are repeating the words loudly and memories start coming and repeating. You can handle that also by using your own imagination to have a fixed image and using it. These are simple techniques which help us to become unaware of our body and die while living. And as you said, so many of you raised your hand, we'll practice them when I'm still here, because I don't believe that a talk is enough. A talk is a talk, but we should walk the talk also. So what we say, we should practice, and not practice later on, practice while the iron is hot. That is when we just hear, we should practice. That is why in all my talks now, I'm also including meditation sessions so that we can practice what we talk about. But just to give you an idea, what happens when you discover that you have a self, you have a form that exists, and you can experience it even now, you are experiencing it, but the attention is all mostly on the physical body and the physical world outside. Therefore, that remains a sort of an imaginary self of your own. What is imagination? You will discover the power of imagination only when you are unaware of this body. Imagination is not as imaginary as we think. The power of imagination is to create an experience of a world with that imagination. Here, in the physical world, with a physical body, when we imagine something, nothing happens. It's an imagination. But when the physical body is not there, your inner body is there, which you've now been able to experience by becoming unaware of this body, by putting your attention behind the eyes of this physical body, then you get that, you will find whatever you imagine becomes a reality. You will also find, strangely, that most of the life we are leading here was imagined earlier and therefore became a reality here. It's something so unique. You'll see the power of the self, power of consciousness, how it created all experiences. But the very first step is able to show you how imagination is not so imaginary and becomes reality at another level. But we are still living in a similar world, and that inner body of sense perceptions is still a cover upon the self. We have not discovered ourselves. We have only discovered a form of ourselves which seems to be embedded inside this self and which is longer lasting than this and will survive death of the physical body. That's all we have discovered. It's not a discovery of our ultimate self. But by practicing the same thing, by going within that body, the head of that body, which is still similar to this body, going within the head of that body, by similar techniques, you can discover that even sense perceptions are merely a cover upon ourselves, that they are not ourselves. They are just a means of using consciousness in a certain way to create experience. You can go within that and discover that perceptions need not be divided, that you don't have to see and touch and taste and hear separately to have an experience, that the whole experience is built together and we have separated it for creating a variety of experience. That power of perception without dividing is possible with the inner body behind the astral body, which I call the astral or ethereal body that is inside this body. There we discover that the power to think, that the thinking process is not taking place either in this body or in the sensory systems, it's taking place inside. And we call that the causal body because that is the mind. A human mind is the causal body. When we discover that, then we find out that this thinking machine, that what we thought happened, that whatever was the inner thought, the primary thought, primal thought, that is what was creating the experience outside. We see it ourselves. It was the self creating these experiences. That all the experiences were stored there, that we pulled out from there, that we picked up our destinies from there, that what we think is a destiny, why things are happening here, how they are happening, you find the answers to those questions personally yourself by looking at your own mind inside. A mind that you can see, experience without the senses and without the physical body. So long as you have got a physical body, the mind is a hidden thinking machine inside. Nobody can see the mind. But through this process, you can see, experience the mind just by itself and see how it creates sensory perceptions, how it creates everything. You will see that the mind is creating the whole experience of all universes. It's not a theoretical thing, it's a personal experience. It's a great experience. And some of the greatest successful people who have said that they have reached the totality of consciousness, who have found out the truth about themselves, have reached that level to find that the real cause of all experiences is arising from our own mind. Not only that, they also discovered that our mind, which we thought was all divided amongst us individually, was really all one. There's only one mind that is dividing the experience into all of us. That's a great experience by itself. And yet, there are people who tell us that that is not yourself. You just found a cover upon yourself called the mind. That this experience of time, space that we are having, which goes on till that level, is itself not real, is being created. The mind itself is being created by your power of consciousness. Then what is now within that mind? What can you discover within that mind? There is no effort on your part which can go beyond that, because all effort we make of any kind is with our mind. Now, if we have to go beyond effort and go effortlessly, then there must be some other method. If we can't do anything about it, then how do we go? If there is something beyond the mind, how do we find it? Now, that is where the real, true spiritual path starts. The rest is mental games. I could call all these experiences of inner awareness, inner knowledge of yourself, merely as a mental game. It is a mental game. You're using your mind to have these experiences. But how do you now go beyond the mind and discover what is empowering the mind to function? What is empowering the mind, which in turn is empowering this physical body and the senses to function? Isn't that your own self? Isn't that the true consciousness? How do we reach that? No effort can do anything. And how can we be effortless? We don't know how to be effortless. A friend of mine, I was studying in Harvard University, and he one day told me he'd found a way to be effortless. And in the last paragraph of his letter, he wrote to me, he said, I am going to try very hard to be effortless. So you can imagine how the mind functions. We have no way, with the equipment of the mind, senses, and body, to be effortless. Then what is the process which can be effortless and take us beyond the mind? It has to be something that pulls us from beyond the mind. It can't be that we can push ourselves. And you will notice that there is a power within us which pulls us inside. And that we call the power of love. The power of love pulls us. Love is the only experience that I know. The only experience existing in this entire universe, at all levels, which has the power to pull you. All others are push. All mental activity is to push, and love is that pulls. But how does love pull? Love pulls when somebody pulls us. If there is nobody, you can't have a pull. In this physical world, when you have experience of love, there's a beloved. The beloved pulls you. You can't become a lover by yourself. There has to be beloved to pull you. And not only that, the beloved has to pull you first before you experience love. You cannot become a lover unless there's a beloved first. A Persian mystic says, Ishq awwal dar dile mashuk paida mishwal. That love is first born in the heart of the beloved. And then you become a lover. You can't even become a lover. You can't experience love if there is no beloved to pull you. Now, if we have to be pulled beyond the mind, there has to be a beloved that pulls us from beyond the mind. Which means it must be some power that lies in a state beyond the mind. And such a power is also the power of consciousness, but to have this experience of being pulled by that power, it must be separated from us. The lover and beloved must be separated to have that experience. And therefore, the beloved who pulls us from beyond that, in the terms of the physical world, we call that human being who can perform that function, even at that level, we call that a perfect living master. When we talk of a Sant Satguru, when we talk of the teacher who can take us beyond the mind, it is the pull of the love of that person, of that human being. Because we are starting as human beings, this whole journey. So it becomes a human being in that form who pulls us beyond the mind. And the experience is of love and not of meditation. Meditation has its limitations because it's an effort. Love is not an effort. Love is a pull. You're pulled by love. Now, if you have an experience with these kind of people, you will notice that they, who we call the perfect living masters. In America, we abbreviate everything, call them PLMs. These perfect living masters, they start having an association with us. If they are going to be our eternal friends, which means if they are our masters, that means if we have a relationship with them, that we are going beyond the mind to what we call our true home, true state, if they are the ones who are going to be associated with us, they will start by becoming teachers, teaching us methods to push. What is that method? Meditate more, try hard, do this, do that, here are the rules, follow this diet, stay like this. They'll give you instructions. The mind loves that. The mind loves to be taught so that we can learn. The mind has been so indoctrinated with this idea that we have to learn and then struggle and work hard to get anything. That's what we do here, and that's what we try to do in meditation. That's what we try to do when we're trying to achieve anything in outside or inside. So they come and say, yes, follow that process. So they become friends. We say, that's very good, they're giving us some good instructions. They have not come to teach. There are thousands and thousands of teachers who can teach the same thing. But they are adopting this to satisfy our mind that we want to be taught and to learn. It's a very simple method. Now you learn this. But when we try to practice, they create a barrier. It doesn't succeed. For other things, we keep on succeeding. When we try to do what they try to teach us, we don't succeed. And then we say, there's something wrong here somewhere. They are telling us that this, what we are looking for, is beyond teaching and beyond struggle. Eventually, what happens is, gradually, we fall in love with these people. And they attract us with their unconditional love. Love, we can love anybody in this world, but the difference in the love that we experience from such people whom we call the perfect living masters and all other experiences is, their love is totally unconditional, non-judgmental. They never say, we love you if you be good, we hate you if you are not. Those who are initiated will use their mantra given by the masters. Those who are not initiated can use a temporary mantra created by themselves, expressing love for somebody. Close your eyes. Imagine this body of yours is your house in which you live. It has several floors. The lowest floor is right where you're sitting down at the bottom. Then as the floors rise, you are on the 6th floor behind the eyes. And that's the place where you will always meditate. That is your meditation chamber. So go and imagine you are sitting in the middle of this meditation chamber. And you can examine that the house, this body-like house around you on the 6th floor, that you are sitting on top of your throat. You're sitting on top of your body, and the ears are around you, and the eyes are in front of you. Your hair is on top of you, and you are sitting relaxed, totally relaxed, no tension. The body has nothing to do with it. There's no pressure on the body or the head or the eyes. You are using your imagination to sit behind the eyes in the center of the head. And whatever comes in front, look at it, but don't follow it. If any sounds come, listen to the sounds attentively, but don't move towards them. If a sound comes from the top, listen while you're sitting relaxed in the center. Sound comes from the right, listen from the center. Sound comes from the left, stay in the center and listen to it. If two sounds come, pick up the one coming from the right or above and drop the other. And if a sound seems to be around you, pick up that and listen to it attentively. Put all your attention on the sound when the sound comes. Meanwhile, keep on repeating the words. If the sound disappears, go back to repetition. And when the sound comes, drop the repetition, listen to the sound.